As the midterm elections approach, campaigns are dumping money into their elections for a final pre-election push. Talking Points analyst Michael Furnari is here to discuss some of these national campaign finance trends. Michael, thanks so much for joining us. And we've seen some candidates posting historic fundraising numbers this election cycle. Can you give us a big picture of what the fundraising has been like so far?
Absolutely. It's been an absolutely astronomical year so far for spending in this election cycle. Now, so far we've already spent $1 billion between all these different campaigns, and looks like it's going to be on its way to setting a record. Campaigns have already spent about $300 million nationwide on TV ads, which is almost unheard of. These are the kind of numbers you see in a presidential year. And the reason, if you had to ask what the reason is for all this increased spending, I think you can put a lot of it at the feet of President Trump and a lot of it at the feet of a lot of the polarization going on right now. Now, we always talk about, when it comes to political spending, we love to talk about the PACs, we love to talk about all these different kind of like the swampy kind of fundraising. But in reality, what has been contributing a lot more this year is individual donations from a lot of these big party donors. Michael Bloomberg, for example, is going to be donating about $80 million to this election cycle. And those are the kind of numbers that it may not make as many headlines because you're not looking at the NRA or some kind of super PAC for those donations. And I think some of the intensity, the enthusiasm, the polarization, I think that's giving people the sense that they really need to kind of pitch in themselves and really make it a team effort to try to get these candidates over the hump.
So there's a tremendous amount of money being poured into it, but where is this money going? What are the big races? Where are Republicans and Democrats putting all of that money?
The two ones that are the most obvious ones to look at, so you've got the Texas Senate race with O'Rourke and Cruz. Now, Beto O'Rourke made a lot of headlines this week when the campaign finance came out for quarter three. O'Rourke raised about $38 million this quarter, which puts him to about $61 million for this campaign. And wow. If you want to, harken back to 2016, that's more money than Jeb Bush had for his entire presidential campaign. It's more than Marco Rubio had for his campaign. They both had about $50 million. And those are the kind of numbers that I think maybe you might be a little wary of if you're a Democratic strategist, because O'Rourke is down pretty substantially in the polls that we've been seeing recently. And he's a young figure. He's somebody people like a lot, but there's people like Claire McCaskill or Dean Heller's challenger who probably need that money a little bit more than Beto O'Rourke does, and it's maybe a smarter investment. So I think that maybe we're hearkening back to 2016 in the sense that Democrats maybe are looking to the wrong states to try to flip the Senate. And the other race to mention is the Florida Senate race with Bill Nelson and Rick Scott, who are combining for about $50 million between the two of them, which is astronomical, and they're just dumping money into TV right now in Florida.
Now, you have these astronomical numbers in these big races, but how important actually is this money? Does this raising money correlate to success, or is it kind of just almost a horse race to say, look how much more money I raised than my opponent?
That's a good question. And of course, nobody's turning down the money.
Of course.
But I think if you were to look at kind of some of the trends in the Senate, if you look at the seat that Jon Ossoff lost in the special elections, if you look at Hillary Clinton losing to Donald Trump, and the way Beto O'Rourke is looking right now against Ted Cruz, I think money is maybe a little bit overrated. It's obviously important, and I think in the statewide races, the thing that people miss is that what is maybe the most important thing you spend money on is the ground game and on strategy and volunteers and setting up offices around the state, as opposed to TV, which is the big flashy thing that everybody makes money off of. But the results of TV translating to votes have not been great in the last few years. There are a lot of candidates who've put a lot of money into that strategy, and it hasn't really gotten them too far. So I think it's probably overrated, but of course, it's an advantage that nobody's going to turn down.
So we've been talking about kind of the big slugfest in national politics, but let's take it local. Dana Balter versus John Katko. What's the money looking like in that race? Has someone fundraised more? We've seen a lot of TV ads. Can you just shed a little bit of light on that?
Absolutely. Now, at the beginning of the cycle, Dana Balter was not looking like she would be able to stick around too long. I mean, if you remember at the beginning of the campaign, her office was operating out of her house for the campaign at a certain point. And of course, Katko's an incumbent, so he's got a lot of money flowing in from the party and from some of those special interest groups. So Katko definitely has more money. He's got more of an infrastructure. Now, some people see Dana Balter as kind of like an insurgency type candidate, but I think it remains to be seen whether or not she's going to really be able to engineer that turnout. And she's got a little bit less money right now, so she's going to really need to tap into some of those hardcore progressive voters. And if they come out, which is something that remains to be seen in Syracuse, whether or not that's effective. And but certainly in terms of the traditional metrics, Katko certainly has an edge.
Well, in just 3 weeks, we'll see if the money